as a country, we were refreshing our phones and trying to process what happened. And of course, I'm talking about Megan Thee Stallion's breakup with her boyfriend. Yep. Megan broke up with NBA star Klay Thompson. And like all young people, she posted...
Y'all, this isn't just drama anymore. This feels like a full-blown collapse happening in real time. What started as a perfect celebrity romance between Megan Thee Stallion and Klay Thompson is now being ripped apart by one explosive claim after another, and somehow, Cardi B and Stefon Diggs are right in the center of it. From the outside, everything looked polished, public love, quiet support, no chaos. But behind the scenes, something didn't match. But then, everything flipped. Because now, whispers are turning into allegations, and the core of it is brutal, a rumored secret link between Megan and Stefon Diggs, while both were tied to other people. That's where it gets messy. Insiders claim Cardi B had suspicions early. Not proof, not confirmation, but enough to make her question everything. One line reportedly tied to her is spreading fast. Something about that situation never sat right. And, just like that, the narrative shifts. Because now it's not just about a breakup, it's about overlap. And then comes the second twist. Pregnancy rumors. Unconfirmed. Unverified. But viral enough to pour gasoline on everything already burning. Now people are asking, was this just cheating or something deeper? And here's where it gets darker. This isn't the first time Megan's name has been tied to complicated timelines. Past relationships, overlapping rumors, emotional fallout, it's all being pulled back into the spotlight. Same for Diggs, his history, his connections, his patterns. Another alleged voice close to the situation hints. This didn't start recently, this has been building. And now, everything is crashing at once. Breakup, accusations, public pressure, emotional strain. The situation isn't calming down, it's escalating. So the real question is Cardi B exposing something real? Or is this just another rumor storm turning speculation into headlines? And if even half of this is true, then this isn't just scandal. This is the beginning of something way bigger.
About it on Instagram. And according to Megan, Klay cheated on her. And Megan says trust, fidelity, and respect are non-negotiable for me in a
Y'all, this didn't leak by accident. This looks like something that was hidden until it couldn't stay buried anymore. For weeks, Megan Thee Stallion and Klay Thompson were moving like everything was solid, quiet, controlled, almost too perfect. No public chaos, no visible cracks, just a clean image. Then suddenly, everything unraveled at once. But here's where it takes a turn nobody expected. Because behind that perfect front, there are now whispers of a second connection, one that allegedly links Megan to Stefon Diggs. At the same time, she was still publicly tied to Klay. And if that overlap is real, this isn't just a breakup story anymore. It's a betrayal story. The core of the drama is simple, but dangerous. Two high-profile relationships, potentially crossing into one hidden timeline. Late-night communication, quiet meetings, energy that people close to the situation are now calling off. One source, speaking carefully, reportedly described it like this. People noticed the shift before the public did, but no one wanted to say it out loud. And that silence didn't last. Because then another name enters the picture and everything intensifies. Cardi B.
But here's the part that has me and all my girlfriends just shook. Because if a man can cheat on Megan Thee Stallion, what hope do the rest of us have?
Not as a bystander, but as someone who allegedly already had suspicions. There are claims unverified, but spreading fast, that Cardi had been watching the situation closely, especially when it came to Stefon Diggs. According to circulating reports, she felt something wasn't right long before anything became public. One alleged statement being repeated online. She was too close to something that didn't involve her, and it didn't feel normal. That single idea shifted everything. Now it's not just about Megan and Klay falling apart. It's about whether something else was happening behind the scenes the entire time. And just when the situation couldn't get more volatile, another layer drops. Pregnancy rumors. No confirmation. No evidence. Just speculation moving at viral speed, but enough to completely change how people are reading the situation. Because if that rumor holds any truth, then this isn't just emotional betrayal. It becomes something permanent. Something that connects timelines in a way that can't be ignored. And suddenly, the internet starts digging. Not just into the present, but into the past.
Oh all love to Megan. And I'm sad for them because I really like them as a couple. She seemed really close with his parents. She even made Thanksgiving dinner for them. And I'm mad at Clay. So you had me carving the turkey, but you carving out time for other women? I'm over here learning.
Megan's previous relationships are being pulled back into focus. Patterns, overlaps, emotional fallout. Names like Moneybag Yo, Tory Lanez, Partisan Fontaine, all being re-examined through a new lens. At the same time, Stefon Diggs isn't escaping scrutiny either. Old rumors, alleged multiple connections, questions about consistency, everything is resurfacing at once. Another voice close to the narrative allegedly put it this way: "This isn't random. People are connecting dots that were always there." And that's when the pressure starts building. Because now it's not just private anymore. It's public, loud, and spiraling. The emotional weight is reportedly hitting hard behind the scenes. Megan, already dealing with intense public pressure, is now at the center of a storm that questions her relationships, her decisions, and her truth. Clay, silent, but suddenly part of a narrative he didn't control. Cardi, possibly stepping into a situation that directly affects her past with Diggs. And Diggs himself, now positioned as the link between two collapsing stories. Nothing is stable anymore. Every new claim.
Her and now ex-boyfriend Klay Thompson have broken up and accusing him of cheating. And you guys remember we talked about this yesterday, that when she did the show the night after she announced that, and there was a big conversation around it, she got emotional on the stage once she got her standing ovation. And, you know, people believe that it's because of the emotion she was feeling from the announcement.
This isn't cooling down. It's getting sharper, louder, and harder to ignore. What started as a quiet breakup narrative around Megan Thee Stallion and Klay Thompson has now turned into something layered, something that doesn't move in a straight line anymore. Pieces don't fit the way they're supposed to. And people are starting to notice. At first, the story seemed simple: two high-profile names, a relationship that faded, and silence where explanations should have been. But then, timelines began to overlap. Because the moment Stefon Diggs entered the conversation, the narrative stopped being clean. It introduced questions that don't resolve easily, questions about when certain connections started and whether they were ever supposed to be public at all. That's where the tension sits now, right between what was shown and what might have been hidden. The core issue isn't just whether there was a breakup. It's whether that breakup was already inevitable because something else had already begun. And the more people look at it, the less it feels coincidental. One insider perspective, again, unverified but widely repeated, frames it like this: by the time things looked stable on the outside, they were already shifting underneath. That statement alone changes the timeline. It suggests that what the public saw wasn't the beginning of the end, but the middle of something already unraveling. Then another voice enters, and the tone shifts again. Cardi B. Her presence doesn't just add commentary, it adds weight. Because now, this isn't just about observation. It's about suspicion that may have existed before anything.
I don't know why Meg is quitting, but why y'all so quick to blame that on the breakup with Clay? She just got hospitalized for extreme exhaustion a few weeks ago and had to step away. Doctor said she was dehydrated, she had low metabolic levels, vasoconstriction.
Moments that seemed harmless now feel loaded. Interactions that went unnoticed now feel intentional. And then another angle emerges. Not directly confirmed, but impossible to ignore. The pregnancy rumor. It doesn't arrive with evidence, it arrives with impact. Because even without proof, it reshapes how people interpret everything else. It raises the stakes from emotional conflict to something more permanent, something that suggests consequences beyond a breakup. And that's when the narrative becomes unstable. Because now there are multiple versions of the same story, all moving at once. One says this is exaggerated. Another says it's been hidden for too long. And both are gaining traction. So attention shifts again, this time backward. Past relationships are no longer just history, they're being re-examined as potential patterns. For Megan, previous connections are being pulled into the discussion, not as isolated moments, but as part of a larger timeline people are trying to piece together. For Diggs, older rumors resurface with new context, questions about consistency, about overlap, about whether this situation is entirely new or just newly visible. And when patterns start forming, real or assumed, the narrative gains momentum. Another alleged insider voice adds to that momentum. This didn't start with one moment, it built up in silence. Now the situation carries a different weight, because if it built over time, then multiple people may have seen parts of it, but no one saw the full picture. And that's where things begin to spiral. Public reaction is no longer balanced. It's split, reactive, and increasingly intense. Some believe Megan is being pulled into speculation that goes beyond facts. Others believe too many details are lining up to be dismissed. Meanwhile, Clay remains a quiet center in a very loud situation.
Yeah, it's a lot of work already. And now you got to deal with emotional work as well.
Because you can usually push through exhaustion, but she actually got sick a week. She had only been doing a Broadway play for a week, right?
Yeah, it was like her opening week.
Sick. Yeah, but so it could be that. But then on top of that, you got a heartbreak too. So I'm sure that plays a part.
The story didn't fade. It fractured, and every fragment is pointing in a different direction. At this stage, what looked like a contained situation around Megan Thee Stallion, Klay Thompson, Stefon Diggs, and Cardi B is no longer moving as one narrative. It's splitting into layers. Public version, private tension, unverified claims, all running at the same time. At first, people expected clarity to follow the noise, some kind of statement, a timeline, something that could stabilize the situation. But that clarity never came. And that absence? It's now being interpreted as part of the story itself. But here's where everything shifts again. Because instead of answers, what's emerging now are inconsistencies, small ones at first, then harder to ignore. Moments that don't line up. Timelines that feel compressed. Interactions that, when placed side by side, raise more questions than they resolve. And once people begin tracking those details, the narrative starts to feel constructed. Not necessarily false, but incomplete. The core issue is no longer just whether there was overlap. It's whether multiple people were operating with different versions of the same reality at the same time. And that possibility changes everything. One alleged perspective, circulating quietly but gaining traction, frames it like this. Not everyone involved knew the full picture, but everyone felt something was off. That suggests something deeper than miscommunication. It suggests separation, emotional, informational, maybe even intentional. And then comes another angle. Not louder, but sharper. Because now, attention is shifting toward behavior patterns during the relationship, not just before or after. People are revisiting public appearances, subtle shifts in tone, moments where energy felt slightly disconnected. Nothing definitive, but enough to build suspicion. And once suspicion takes hold, it doesn't need confirmation to grow. Then the second twist enters again, but this time, it carries more weight. The pregnancy rumor hasn't disappeared. It's evolved. Still unconfirmed, still without evidence, but now being discussed not just as gossip, but as a potential explanation for the intensity of everything unfolding. Because if something like that were even partially true, it would explain the urgency, the silence, the sudden fractures. And it would connect timelines in a way that's impossible to ignore. That's why it keeps resurfacing. Not because it's proven, but because it fits too many unanswered questions. And once that possibility exists, every past detail starts being reinterpreted. The backstory becomes critical. Megan's previous relationships are no longer viewed individually, they're being analyzed collectively. Patterns, timing, emotional fallout. Each one is now part of a larger narrative people are trying to decode. At the same time, Diggs' history continues to circulate stories, rumors, associations, being pulled forward as if they hold context for what's happening now. And when two separate histories begin to overlap in public perception, it creates something powerful. A storyline that feels consistent, even if it isn't fully verified. Another alleged voice adds to that perspective. This wasn't sudden. It just became visible all at once. And that idea is what's driving the current wave. Because if something becomes visible all at once, then it means it existed quietly before. Which brings the focus back to the present moment. Because now, everything is accelerating. Public reactions are no longer just divided, they're escalating. The tone has shifted from curiosity to judgment. From speculation to assumption. And that shift is affecting how every detail is being processed. Megan is now at the center of a narrative that questions both her past and her present. Clay remains distant, but that distance is now being interpreted in multiple ways: restraint, strategy, or something else entirely. Cardi's alleged perspective continues to circulate, adding pressure from another angle, one that ties emotional reaction to personal history. And Diggs? He remains the constant link, every version of the story looping back to his position in it. No single version dominates anymore. Instead, multiple interpretations are colliding. And with each collision, the situation becomes harder to contain. There's no resolution, no confirmed timeline, no single voice bringing clarity. Only fragments, repeating, reshaping, expanding, which leads to a deeper question. Not just about what happened, but about how stories like this evolve. Because at what point does repetition start to feel like truth? And at what point does silence start to feel like confirmation? That's where this stands now. Between what is known and what is being believed. So the final question isn't simple. It's layered. Are these overlapping narratives exposing something that was always there? Or are they building something that only appears real because of how it's being told? Because if perception continues to outpace proof, then this won't end with clarity. It'll end with a version of the story that people accept. whether it was ever fully true or not. And just when it feels like there's nothing left to uncover, the silence gets louder. No confirmations. No denials. Just gaps, and those gaps are exactly where the internet is digging the hardest. Because now people aren't waiting for facts anymore, they're building their own conclusions. Every post, every old clip, every interaction is being reanalyzed like evidence in real time. And the more people look, the more this stops feeling like coincidence. It starts feeling connected. If even a fraction of these claims hold weight, then this wasn't a random fallout. It was something that had been developing quietly, right in front of everyone, just hidden well enough to avoid detection. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because a hidden narrative, once exposed, doesn't just explain the present, it rewrites the past. Now the pressure isn't just on what happened, it's on who knew, who ignored it, and who stayed silent until it was too late. The lines are blurred. The timelines are questioned. And the people involved are now facing a version of the story that's bigger than any single truth. So the real question isn't whether the situation will calm down. It's how much more is still sitting beneath the surface. Because if this is only what leaked, then what hasn't? And if the next piece drops clear, undeniable, impossible to spin, then this won't just be another headline. It will be a turning point. Not just for one relationship, but for every narrative tied to it.